clutch master cylinder and clutch slave cylinder. Let's go. It's optional to jack up the car and put it on jack stands, so you have more room to work underneath the car. You don't have to, but it's easier. This is what we'll be changing today. This is the clutch master cylinder. It's the smaller one. The bigger one is the brake one. So we're on the clutch one. On the block or transmission housing, my clutch master cylinder is messed up. So it's good to change both this and the slave cylinder at the same time. The slave cylinder is not even that expensive, so just change both of them. Here's how bad it is. It's dark black. The brake fluid inside is mixed with grease because the mechanism right here, it's broken. The master cylinder down there. So I checked all the lines at least 10 times throughout the car for the clutch lines, and there's absolutely no leak. So the master cylinder itself is failing. When you're working with brake fluid, you want to use gloves and possibly eye goggles, because brake fluid is very harmful. So put your gloves on. Or my goggles. So you're gonna attach a tube to the bleeder valve to drain all of the fluid inside, and you're gonna need a wrench to open it up. Alright, you can see the tube is connected to the bleeder valve, and I route it underneath the car. The tube is right there, and it's gonna drip into this oil bucket. Alright, now you're gonna loosen up the bleeder valve, and then you're gonna go inside the car, and then you're gonna keep pumping the clutch pedal until all the fluid is drained out. Here's where the clutch pedal is. If you look above the clutch pedal, you can see where the rod is that goes into the master cylinder, and there's grease leaking out of my master cylinder, and that's why my master cylinder has a really dark black fluid inside the reservoir. It's not supposed to be like that. So the cylinder is actually ruined. At the end of the rod right here, on this side, you'll see the cotter pin. It looks like a hairpin. The cotter pin's right there, right in the center. Just remove it with a plier. This is the attachment. It's like a bolt. You remove it after you remove the cotter pins. There's a clip right there on the end of the hose. Loosen it, slide it upwards, and detach the hose from the cylinder. Loosen up this the clutch line right here, loosen it up and remove it from the cylinder. So remove both these two, detach it from the cylinder. Detach the hose. There's two bolts here, you want to loosen it up and remove the entire bracket in the reservoir. And move the reservoir out of the way. There is two nuts on the back of the cylinder from inside the car that needs to be removed. We're back inside the car. Remove that nut. And the other nut is on the other side. Right there. That's where the other nut is. Remove both those nuts. Once these two nuts have been removed from inside the car, you can now remove the clutch master cylinder. Here is my old clutch master cylinder. It looks really nasty. Grease is all over inside where the rod is. Next, you're going to remove the clutch slave cylinder. Unbolt the clutch line right there, and then remove the line. And then you have to go under the bottom of the slave cylinder, and you'll see two bolts that mount the slave cylinder into the transmission housing. Alright, I just removed the clutch line, you can see it. When you go under the car, you will see two bolts right here, and these two bolts are the only thing that mount the clutch slave cylinder into the car. Remove it. When the two bolts are removed, you can take out the slave cylinder. Just pull it straight out to the right. This is a new slave cylinder. And you're gonna grease this rod, grease the whole rod, the thin layer, and place it back into the slave cylinder. Just like how the old one was. Make sure the boot sits perfectly onto the rod. It has a groove for it to sit properly. You can also grease this section of the rod on the master cylinder. Now we're going to put both the new parts back. The clutch master cylinder and the clutch slave cylinder. These are the new parts. Put them back in reverse order of how you took them out earlier. You will need to bench bleed the new clutch master cylinder. I'll show you how to do it. There's many ways to do it. There's even a kit that lets you bench bleed, but here's another way you can do it. It's a little bit more difficult, but it doesn't require a kit. Put your gloves back on because you'll be working with brake fluid. This is your old reservoir. Connected to the new cylinder. You can tighten the hose if you want with the clip. Perfect. Add brake fluid on here. Now you're going to squeeze this rod and it will squirt out of here. The trick is you want to squeeze in, just like that. Put your hand over the hole and then release the rod. Keep doing that until fluid pours out of the hole right here. So, hands out, push the rod, cover the hole with your hands, release the rod, and you can let go. Keep repeating the process. Make sure there's enough brake fluid in the reservoir. Add a little bit more. Push in, cover, release the rod. Alright, I think we're good. Put the cap back on. Once the slave cylinder is put back, reattach the clutch line and then reattach the tube to bleed it. There's a few ways to bleed the clutch fluid. The way I like the most is having two people bleeding the clutch fluid. What you do is you have one person stand in front of the car where the bleeder valve is, and you have one person in the driver's seat at the clutch pedal. So here is the clutch pedal and here is the bleeder valve. So what you want to do is you want to there's many ways to do this, but here's my favorite one. So the person in the car, clutch down, open valve, close valve, clutch up, down, open, close, up. So you just repeat that cycle the entire time. Okay? So all you do is make sure the bleeder valve is closed when the person inside the car picks up the clutch pedal again. You should be bleeding the clutch fluid while the reservoir cap is off. Here's the cap. Just leave it off and just continue bleeding. When you're bleeding the clutch fluid, you'll see that the water level inside the reservoir will go down when the pedal goes up. So make sure that the reservoir never gets empty. So when it gets kind of low, you keep adding brake fluid to fill it back up to the top and keep repeating the process. Once the bleeding is done, everything's ready to go. So just make sure the pedal is in its upright position, and you close the reservoir and you close the bleeder valve, and everything should be good. And that's it. If yours was ruined, you can have a more noticeable improved shift transitions when you clutch it in. It's gonna feel better when you transition gears. So that's how you change your slave cylinder and your clutch master cylinder. Good luck.